Hailing frequencies open and welcome aboard Treks and Tangents. I'm your co-host Brian.
And I'm your co-host Jaci. I'm the Star Trek newbie who checks off on tangents.
And I'm your Star Trek expert who is here to get the tangents back on track. Each episode we watch and talk about a different Star Trek episode. And this week we watched
Star Trek, the original series, Season 1, Episode 20, Court Martial.
Welcome back to another episode. I think I made a mistake last week in our episode. I think I said we were 1/3 of the way through the first season. We're officially 2/3 of the way through the first season.
Look at us go. We're just like rolling through it.
Rolling through it. Appreciate everyone jumping on board for another episode. Leave a like, leave a comment. Specifically, tell us what you thought about the episode and tell us if there's any Star Trek topic you would like us to cover in maybe a bonus episode, maybe in a separate post on our Patreon. Let us know what you'd be interested in hearing.
Or even if you want to know about us. We're really interesting.
Some would say that. But let's just dive into the episode and start off, as we always do, by revisiting last week's Turbolift tease. That's where we gave Jaci the title of this week's episode, and Jaci, with no other information, tried to guess or predict the plot of this week's episode. Computer, what was Jaci's random guess last week?
Jaci's random guess last week was, the Enterprise is exploring space and the galaxy, but they get a call and somebody from somebody's past. I'm going to say Sulu is in trouble and obviously needs their help.
So Jaci, I think we both agree on this one, but how do you think you did on this week's guess?
Bombed it.
Yeah, there's I'll tie it in. Someone from someone's past. Okay, we had Shaw in Kirk's past.
Okay, but
she wasn't really in trouble. Sulu didn't even appear in the episode.
I was very sad about that.
Yeah, neither Sulu nor Scotty appear in this episode.
And a whole new navigator.
Who was the navigator this episode?
They never said his name, but it wasn't the cutie pie that, posed in the Gothos one.
Yeah, it wasn't
DeSalle.
I don't remember who the navigator was. Not important. But yeah, I think we can both agree you missed on the Turbolift tease for this episode.
Well, I'm getting used to these weird names with weird episodes, so I'm getting more creative as time goes by.
But let's put that behind us and talk about our initial impressions. What did you think of this week's episode?
You're going to be surprised, but I really liked it.
Why?
I really enjoyed the dialogue, the discussion between all the different characters, all the ranks. There wasn't too much, fawning over the ladies, and the ladies kicked butt.
Okay. I also think this was a pretty entertaining episode. Dialogue, sure. Cogley as a character is very entertaining.
Yes.
When they let him loose and let him do his thing. So his dialogue was pretty entertaining. It's got some pacing problems to it. It feels like it runs very, very long.
Yes, I did feel that, but I wasn't feeling bored though.
No. And in the end, some of it's a little cheesy. His whole courtroom outburst speech about rights gets kind of repetitive, but I understand the importance to the episode to it. It's entertaining. I will say I ultimately liked it. I enjoyed watching a law drama play out. This is kind of what I think the menagerie was aiming for, because we had a court-martial proceeding in the menagerie. But with the menagerie, everything was focused on the replaying of the cage.
Which that was very unique of itself.
It was. So even though the menagerie was a courtroom setting, it's not really a law drama. This definitely was more of a law drama. Definitely had that feeling to it. Yeah, in the end, it was a good episode, I think.
It's probably why I watch all of my true crime shows and stuff.
But without any other delays, since as an editor I say our episodes run longer than they should, let's try to jump into it. Jaci, why don't you walk us through the episode?
we'll skip. How about that? So we're seeing beautiful space, the Enterprise, and there's like that little pod. I've never seen the pod flying around with it.
Yeah, that would be a repair ship of some kind. There's the shuttlecraft, there's lots of little things zooming around it. We also get a shot of another Galaxy class starship in the background. Spoiler, this is going to be the Intrepid. We're going to hear it mentioned here in a little bit. It is, if I recall correctly from my Star Trek nerd lore, it is a Federation ship that is manned entirely by Vulcans.
Oh, so Spock can wave and say hi.
Pretty much.
That was the first thing I noticed because it changed. But Kirk tells us that they have just been through an ion storm that sadly killed a crewman and damaged the Enterprise greatly. So the ship will be stopping at Starbase 11 to be repaired, and we'll get a full report of damages once we're down there. Now we're in the Commander Stone's office, and Captain Kirk is preparing his official statement of what happened during the storm. He has rewritten it and read it over 3 times. And the Commodore's like, everything okay? You keep reading it. And Kirk just expresses that the loss of a crew member is quite important.
Yeah, it's a little odd that this is the first time that we've seen Kirk have to give any sort of responsibility to the death of a crew member. We've seen so many of them die so far in our adventures with the Enterprise, but by golly, this is going to be the first one that he gets held accountable for.
Well, maybe it's OSHA because it happened on the ship.
Yes, that is when Space OSHA kicks in, is if it's on the ship. If it's on an alien planet, forget about it. All rules are off.
So while Kirk is on that planet, Spock is on the Enterprise preparing a report from the computer system that will print out everything that the computer did, kind of like a transcript, like from a black box. And so he has to bring it down to the starbase so that the report from Kirk and the computer report can be given together as part of the deposition. So that's part of the sworn statement.
Right, Stone's going to use the computer records to cross-reference against what Kirk's statement says and compare the facts, which is where he gets into trouble.
And it's really weird that all these reports are on like tiny 3x5 floppy disks
that are just, yeah, hunks of plastic.
So, but while we're waiting for that to pop down, the Commodore has already called the repair people, and he's moved that Intrepid that we saw earlier. He's bumped it out and put the Enterprise above it on the Fix Me First list.
Right. The Enterprise is the flagship of Starfleet. So besides maybe playing favorites just a little bit, because at this point no one suspects anything. No one blames Kirk for the death. They think it's just a routine death. So slightly favorites, but it could be argued that Stone recognizes how important it is to get the Enterprise out of repairs and back into space as quickly as possible.
And when he has everything together, the Commodore just comments to Kirk about how bad it is to lose a man like Lieutenant Commander Finney. Kirk agrees, saying, I mean, the storm got worse, taking from the yellow alert that he created, and then it was like immediately he had to take it to red. But he made sure that he gave Finney plenty of time to get back to the ship before he did the jettison move. And I didn't know what that was until I Googled. And that was like dropping everything and saying bye.
Yeah, so we'll just knock this out of the park right now real quick. What this pod is, when the ship travels through an ion storm, and you can imagine it's got its deflector shields up, the pod is supposed to be this little device that hangs off the side of the ship. It's got all these extra sensors. Besides scientific investigation, it's helping give the ship data to know how severe the storm is it in danger, and I imagine it's because it hangs out outside the ship beyond the deflector, beyond the shields of the ship, somewhat. it's a dangerous position to be in. Someone has to be down there in order to, I assume, monitor the equipment. We don't really get a whole lot of details to what this thing is. If you look up later, like we are now in 2026, nerds have expanded on the mythology of Star Trek and we get all this extra data. So it's a little thing that hangs off the side of the ship. Finney was in it or near it. And the whole purpose is if it gets ripped off, it can destroy or severely damage the ship. Jettisoning it means it closes it off, shoots it off so that the hull is then sealed up by the ship, but sends Finney along with it.
And so while they're talking, I added twinkle twinkle because that's when Spock arrives with that report they've been waiting for. And he is hesitant to give it to Kirk right away. And the Commodore just steals it from his hand because the Spock wanted to tell Kirk something, but we don't know yet what it was. And then, so they're all putting their paperwork together. And then this young girl in a blue dress that I swear Sailor Moon got this outfit from, runs in and is yelling at Kirk, calling him a murderer because Feeney was her father.
Right. Her name is Jamie.
Yes, Jamie. And she's screaming and
hysterically.
I mean, she's sad. Her daddy died.
Yep.
But Spock is asked to take her away while the Commodore keeps asking Kirk, all right, let's go again. Tell me what happened. All those orders, the lights. When did you push the button?
Well, specifically, Stone quickly hones in on this irregularity in the facts where Kirk is explaining that he jettisoned the pod after calling for red alert, but all of a sudden the computer records are showing that the ship was still on yellow alert when Kirk jettisoned the pod. We'll get into more detail later. But in any case, Stone realizes that this is serious enough. He has an 180-degree turnaround with his attitude, confines Kirk to base, and says he needs to investigate whether a court-martial is warranted. And we get our opening credits.
We come back from the credits, and Kirk and McCoy are moseying into a bar on this starbase. And they say hello to everyone, and it even seems like, hey, this is like our graduating class from Starfleet. Hey, everybody. But nobody is saying hi back. They're all giving them the evil side eye.
Yeah, everyone's giving him the cold shoulder. Kirk is trying to make the best of things, but it quickly becomes apparent that everyone has heard about Finney's death. Everyone has heard about the fact that Kirk is now ordered to stay at the starbase, which would, I think, be unusual. I would imagine once Kirk gave his report, he would have been released and gone back up to the Enterprise to oversee repairs. So everyone knows that Kirk's kind of in a little bit of trouble.
So Kirk is like, I'm over this. And he just like stomps out and he runs into someone, like another guy. You know, they do that dance as you're like trying to leave and come into the room. And he passes by this beautiful blonde lady as she walks in. And she notices Kirk, but he doesn't notice her. So she doesn't really know for sure if that's him. But we still have McCoy. And since Kirk left him there with a drink in his hand, he walked over to the young lady and he playfully just says, yes, that was the James Kirk that just walked out. And then he introduces himself as a friend of Kirk's. And this is when I learned that McCoy's real name is Leonard, or his first name is. And the woman introduces herself as Ariel Shaw, who is also a friend of his, and she iterates that for quite some time. And McCoy, I mean, he's full of jokes tonight. He says, all of my old friends look like doctors, and Kirk's old friends, they all look like you. I mean, mentioning she's beautiful. I mean, she's wearing an outfit that definitely catches your eye.
Yeah, Kirk seems to always get the bad rap of being a schmoozer and a ladies' man. McCoy himself is also a hell of a schmoozer and definitely doesn't get the credit or the attention I think that he deserves. He's definitely a flirt. We've seen it in past episodes. I just wanted to point out that McCoy does okay in the ladies' department. He definitely is a flirt. He's a space player.
I like it. They go off to have a drink together, and then we are jumped to Stone's office. At this point, Stone has turned on his computer and he is starting to record the inquiry. This inquiry is going to decide if there needs to be a court martial called for the actions that Kirk did during the Ion storm and with Finney losing his life. Commodore Stone also wants to know, how do you know each other? Like, tell me about your history. And Kirk explains that Finney was an instructor at the academy, and when working together, Kirk went to relieve Finney on a ship. There happened to be an antimatter access panel, and then if it had been left open 5 more minutes, the entire ship, its name is the Republic, by the way, would have blown up. So it seems that bad things just seem to follow Finney because of his long time teaching that isn't normal, and then having that error on his report being turned in by Kirk, and he just couldn't move up the ladder to where he wanted to be. He's quite jealous of Kirk and his successes.
Yeah, because this would mean with the negative mark on his record, he was constantly passed up for promotion. Ultimately, we learned Finney wanted to be captain of a starship. He never got the promotion because other candidates were more favorable on paper because they didn't have this reprimand.
And then Commodore Stone, though, wants to know, why did you send Finney out to work on the pod? Like, couldn't somebody else do it? And Kirk replies that he was next on the duty roster. There was no picking whomever. He just had to go.
He doesn't play favorites. And, coincidentally, doesn't play disfavorites. Again, Kirk is trying to correct Commodore Stone's inquiry or line of inquiry by saying, I didn't have anything negative against Finney. It's also revealed, of course, that Finney's daughter, Jamie, was named after Kirk. James.
That's super cute. Kirk reiterates that he was watching all the readings and all of the signals went from yellow alert to red alert, but Commodore Stone wants to know why the computer is showing different. And Kirk doesn't have an answer because he knows exactly what he did, and what the computer is showing is not what he did. The Commodore even kind of like, brother, come on, get closer to me. Like, we can make this just go away. Just admit that it's a stressful job and you have too much on your plate, and, you'll just have a nice vacation and then have groundwork. There's no need to make a fuss.
He's doing that to try to protect Starfleet and the integrity of starship captains. Instead of have it go to trial, have what he presumes to be a fairly short, straightforward trial, because he has, in his mind, irrefutable evidence, computer records, saying that Kirk jettisoned the pod while it was still on yellow alert. It is a plea deal to get Kirk to quietly sweep everything under the rug, and they can try to make everything go away without a lot of negative publicity.
But Kirk is fighting all of this. He did everything right. So he's like, bring on that trial. And then we have a commercial.
And if it feels like the episode is dragging on, so much of pacing issues in Act 1 for this episode. Thankfully, they cut some things out. Geez, I'm even looking at the Memory Alpha display. Act 1 and Act 2 are just real slogs.
Like how I used to write my notes.
Yeah, we won't talk about that. But we come back from commercial break. Kirk is back in the rec room where he runs into Shaw. I don't know if he runs into Shaw or if it was a predetermined meeting. Maybe McCoy, off camera, told him that Shaw was here. But in any case, they meet in the rec room. It's a very flirty rendezvous. It's been about 4 years since they've seen each other. There's obvious history between the two. She mentions that she works in the judge advocate's office. Foreshadowing, we'll see in a moment. But it's kind of odd because she gives Kirk all this advice about the upcoming trial because she knows about it. Everyone knows about it. Tells him he's not taking it seriously enough. Kirk is definitely not, at least not in view of her. I think Kirk is taking it seriously to a point where he is nervous but confident that he'll be found not guilty.
Well, I don't think he wants to show how worried, if he is worried, in front of this beautiful woman that he has feelings for.
Sure. Shaw continues to give her unsolicited advice, telling Kirk that it's obvious that he's going to try to refute the records of the computer. She tells him that's a no-win situation. No one's going to believe that the computer can be inaccurate. She recommends a lawyer named Samuel T. Cogley, and even goes so far as to say that he'll pay Kirk a visit later. Let's just pretend that Shaw hired him, or at least tipped him off and got it all set up. But in any case, she finally maybe realizes that she's gone too far and stepped over a line in giving Kirk all this unsolicited advice. She goes to leave, but Kirk wants to know why she's trying to leave, why she won't be his lawyer, because again, she works in the judge advocate's office, and she confides that she is the prosecutor. She is going to be the lawyer, the attorney that is trying to prosecute Kirk. And she tells him, it's my job to find you guilty for the good of everything. And I think she's going to try her best.
Yeah, and part of that best, though, is that she has to truly make an example of this Starfleet captain. He's not some Joe Schmo. She's making an example of him. At least that's the goal.
Right, which I think she heavily implies that that's maybe not necessarily her motivation or her wishes, but that is her instructions from her higher ups. This is what Shaw was trying to avoid, was a Starfleet captain, especially one as decorated as Kirk, to be made an example of. And it's obvious that that's what Starfleet wants to do.
So Kirk decides that he's going to go to bed. He wants to go back to his quarters, but guess who's in his quarters and taking up all the space? His new lawyer. It's like he's a human library.
Taking up all space with his books.
Yes, because that is where the law lives. It's not just static and unmoving. It's a live thing to him.
Yeah, and this is, I think, an unexplored or at least a wasted opportunity for Cogley's character. As a lawyer, as someone who relies on the books, it's also balanced. It's not just that he has a preference for books, he has a negative attitude and opinion about computers. He finds them to be lifeless, and they don't convey the meaning and the weight of the law. I think this is a wasted opportunity because this is obviously going to be a trial of Kirk versus the computer's records. And so this definitely could have been an opportunity, and this could have played out more with Cogley's character about his distrust for computers. But in the end, I think it's just kind of left on the floor as a quirk of his character, even though it was obvious they were trying to tie it into the overall episode.
I totally agree. And they could have done something more with his wardrobe. They tried to make him eccentric, but it did not come across the show as how eccentric I think they wanted him to be.
The term that Jaci is looking for is Cogley's clothing was fugly.
Yeah.
Frumpy.
Yeah. Like he could have had like some color thrown in there. But Kirk has to be honest. He doesn't seem very confident in this man at all. But Ariel, Ms. Shaw, she recommended him, so he must be good.
And we find out, boy, howdy is he.
And then off to the court-martial we go.
I would just like to point out again for everyone who's paying attention to the pacing issues of this episode, this marks, with the opening credits, the 15-minute mark of the episode. So everything that we've just covered, everything we've gone into detail for, has been 15 minutes of this episode. It accelerates really quickly at the end, but as entertaining as this episode is, pacing is definitely a problem.
Yes, imagine if I was writing it out like before. Oh my gosh, a whole novel.
Right.
So we're popping over to where we have the court-martial, and on the bench, We have the Commodore Stone, as well as Space Command Representative Lindstrom and Captains Krasnovsky and Chandra. And they bring everything to order by tingling a little bell. It's so cute.
Much like I think they did in the menagerie at Spock's court-martial.
I just think it's super cute. We also have the prosecution, that's Ariel Shaw. We have the defense, Kirk and his lawyer, and then we have Jamie, a red shirt, and then Spock, McCoy, and a young lady that we don't know whose name is, but she's the personnel administrator.
Right.
First to the stand, Ariel calls Spock, and Spock states that the computer report is incorrect. He goes on to explain that Kirk would never panic in such chaos, and Ariel tries to object to this, saying that Spock is speculating. And then Spock has to go on and say, I'm a Vulcan. We don't speculate. We tell the truth. If a hammer's going to fall, it's going to fall. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, specifically Spock says, as his analogy, that because this is all in reference to, he says that he knows Kirk didn't prematurely eject the pod before calling the ship up to red alert to warn Finney. And Shaw asks if Spock saw Kirk actually press the button and what order he pressed him in. And Spock says, no, but I know what he did. And the analogy you bring up, which I thought was good. I think this is a good moment and a good scene for Spock's character. He says, if I know a hammer falls, if I let go of the hammer on a planet with gravity, I don't need to see it fall. I know it falls. So he's very good about not falling into any of Miss Shaw's traps. And ultimately, I don't think this was a very strong witness for the prosecutor's case.
Shaw closes up her questioning for Spock, and the defense is asked about their questioning opportunity, and that defense lawyer denies any questions. Shaw then calls up the second witness to speak, and we're introduced to the personnel officer, and we don't even know her name.
Yeah, we're not really introduced to her. She never has a name. She's not credited. There's no character name in the credits. Even when you dig through every other piece of Star Trek, this is just one character that never gets a name.
That's wild.
It's possible that in maybe a snippet of cut dialogue, she's given a name, and that little snippet never saw the light of day. There's lots of scenes from this episode that get cut, especially as we get into the back half of the episode to save on time. So while on the stand, Shaw has the personnel officer reiterate the time that Kirk wrote up Finney for his mistake when they served together on the Republic. This is showing the viewers that Shaw is laying out a defense that not only did Finney have a falling out and negative feelings toward Kirk, but trying to show that Kirk had negative feelings and the stage was set for Kirk to hate Finney as well. After Shaw finishes asking her questions, they ask if the defense has any questions, and again, Cogley declines to ask any questions in cross-examination.
I found it super cute, though, that as she got off the stand and walked away, she was mouthing how sorry she was to Kirk. But, I mean, she was called as a witness, so that's what she had to do what she had to do.
She's also the only one that walked around from the stand to pass close enough to Kirk to say anything to Kirk. If you notice, both Spock and now McCoy, the other witness that will get called, they walk the opposite way around the stand as far away from Kirk as they can. Just an interesting note.
Prosecutor Shaw then calls Dr. McCoy to the stand, and his question was actually kind of weird. She wanted to know if it's true that fellow employees, if one thinks the other one has a problem with them, they kind of each grow in their heads a similar story about each person not liking each other, and that this can grow into a giant mess.
Right, because McCoy is called to the stand not as an eyewitness to what occurs, but as an expert witness on the topic of psychology. He's a doctor, but he also is highly trained in psychology. And in Star Trek, there's a special branch of psychology at this point called space psychology, because all of these crew members are working together in confined spaces on a starship for long periods of time. These are basically submarines in space. Although I don't think at any point in our history so far we've ever dealt with ocean psychology. But yeah, all of Shaw's questions are relating to psychology and mindsets. And you're right. She's trying to paint and put a button on that thought that she started with the personnel officer, that if Finney hated Kirk and Kirk knew about that hatred, maybe even unknown to Kirk, but Kirk would start to resent and hate Finney as well.
And then in the end, he could even take him out, hypothetically, of course, during this chitter chatter. And there was no questions to be asked by the defense for Dr. McCoy either. Commodore Stone asks Cogley if he has questions for Dr. McCoy, and again, no questions. So then Commodore Stone says, well, it is now your turn to present your part. Are you going to bring anybody up or have anyone speak, or are you just resting your case? And Cogley says, why, yes, I am going to call Kirk to the stand.
Yeah, specifically, I think this is my favorite moment with Cogley, because when Commodore Stone kind of gets exasperated with him, he kind of gives that sass right back to him. He stands up and he says, well, I was just kind of holding myself back and holding back the defense until all of this, quote, preliminary business was over, and wanting to get Kirk up on the stand so we could actually get down to the meat and bones of everything. So it's not I really wanted this to be my end of the episode quote, but it's not significant enough without the context of it. But this is, I think, that my favorite part. This really shows the first moment that we get to see sassy Cogley and all of his ego.
And not just like he's dreaming in the clouds.
Right. He's not the absent-minded bookworm that I think the episode has started to paint him as. The old-fashioned, I refuse to use a computer, inefficient lawyer. I think this really is the first spark of a moment that as an audience we go, oh shit, he knows something.
Kirk takes the stand and the computer starts ringing off all of his accolades. And Shaw jumps up and says, stop, we don't need to be wasting time on all this. Let's just keep going. And Cogley's like, nope, I'd rather if we keep going. So Commodore Stone agrees, we're gonna keep going. And we read some more awards. And then Cogley's like, okay, I think I'm done. And
yeah, it's another little fun scene where we get to see the sassiness of Cogley. Obviously, Shaw doesn't want all the accolades read because she doesn't want Kirk put too high up on a pedestal as a good character. Cogley obviously wants the accolades read off to add to Kirk's credibility, but I think also this is the moment where Cogley is kind of putting his foot down and again, I'm going to control this.
Cogley asks the captain, tell us how that day happened. Kirk again states that he was called for red alert before jettisoning the pod. Cogley asks if Kirk did everything correctly. Kirk stands firm in everything he did during the ion storm. The same steps at the right time were necessary to save the Enterprise. Nothing is more important than my ship. Cogley asks if he had to do it again, would Kirk do the exact same thing? And Kirk says yes, he would. Interestingly, Shaw asks to bring up a visual of what happened on the bridge during the eye of the storm when she's cross-examining Kirk. So we see a whole video of the bridge, like a CCTV kind of thing.
Yeah, specifically, it looks like a CCTV recording. When I first rewatched this, I had a flashback again to the menagerie. I don't know why we keep referring to the menagerie, but it was a big deal for them to watch the playback of the menagerie because they were so confounded and so confused because there is no record that is that detailed, which makes sense because the menagerie is shot with cameras observing unseen. The way this is shot is 100% a CCTV overhead shot. They didn't reuse footage from earlier in the episode. They filmed an entire scene from a camera's perspective of what would be set up as a surveillance camera to take a record.
I think it was really creative.
I agree. I think it was extremely effective.
Kirk calls Finney to come back to the Enterprise from where he's at so that he could be safe. But then Shaw freezes and zooms in on the panel that Kirk has his hands on. He's pushing buttons. And we see that he pushes the yellow alert. And again, he's like, Finney, how you doing? Hurry up. We need to go to red alert. Because remember earlier he said to Commodore Stone, I gave him the time he needed. And then we're back to the bridge and it's wobbling and our great actors are doing their stunt work. I love it when they're wobbling around. And Shaw then has the screen freeze and it's still yellow alert that's lit up on the panel when Kirk pushes for the jettison button.
Yeah. Let's also just mention really quick that the control panel that Kirk is using on the armrest of his chair is literally just, it's 5 buttons. The buttons are labeled with what looks like a label maker, and it's just yellow alert with a yellow button, red alert with a red button, and I don't remember what color the button was to jettison the pod, the little light that comes up next to it, but it's just a little odd for a ship with as much sophistication that he's got 5 buttons, but only 3 of them are labeled to do anything. Maybe they're programmable for different circumstances. Maybe that's what the yeoman's job is to bust out the label maker every time they reprogram the buttons on the captain's chair.
True. Or, he doesn't remember anything and he's like, shoot, which one is it?
Right. But this is the definitive evidence against Kirk. This is why Shaw was advising Kirk earlier, don't try to argue that the computer is inaccurate, because she knew she had this piece of evidence that seems to be infutable, that Kirk jettisoned the pod without calling the ship to red alert. Again, the red alert would have warned Finney it was time to get the hell out of there.
But Kirk's super confused and he even says out loud, that is not how it happened.
Right. We get William T. Shatner's most dramatic acting of the episode in that one line.
So we come back from our break and we're in the quarters and Kirk is on edge. He's not accepting that the video is correct. He knows he did the right thing. Cogley is, trying to smooth it over and say, we can still do like a plea deal, but except that there's a lot of stress as a captain. Again, everything that we talked about at the beginning, that they wanted to sweep under the carpet. Spock calls down to Kirk, and Kirk calls back up. Spock has been running extra analysis on their computer, and Kirk's like, I don't know what to tell you. You're just gonna have to live with it, and the next captain, he might be able to beat you at chess. And then Spock gets like an idea. Just see him light up. But then we're still in Kirk's quarters, and Jamie actually pops through the door and is introduced to the attorney, Mr. Cogley. Jamie is crying and begging the attorney to please help Kirk with anything that he can so that he's not punished harshly. He wants him to, a ground job, anything, because she actually found writings and other memorabilia from her father, and her father really enjoyed the relationship that he had with Kirk.
Right, and one of the scenes or bits of dialogue that was filmed but cut from the final episode that really takes away a lot of context to this, and what motivated Jamie's change of heart, is that in reading those letters and journals from her father, it led her to the understanding of just how deep of a hatred her father had toward Kirk in their falling out, which leads Jamie to believe, this is the cut part, that her father is capable of deception and setting up and framing Kirk. I don't think at this point she knows that her dad is still alive. Maybe she's starting to think that her father was willing to die in order to ruin Kirk's career. But in any case, that's the real reason why she runs in and tries to save Kirk and has the change of heart, not only understanding the deep friendship that they had, but also this conclusion that she's drawn.
Look at you giving a little spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, Cogley tells her it's too late to change anything, but it seems to be a little twinkle in Cogley's eye. There's something around the corner.
Yep. So now Cogley's got an idea on how to turn everything around, and Spock has an idea to turn everything around, to pull it all together.
Spock is on the Enterprise playing with his vertical chessboard, and McCoy is going nuts. How can you be playing chess when all this is happening? But Spock lets him know that he has beat the computer 4 times in a row. Yeah, so, well, Spock reprogrammed the computer to make it, if he played at his best every single time, the best that would happen would be a draw between Spock and the computer. So he thinks he found the chink in the big time armor around this scenario, and to the transport room we go. So we're now back down at the trial. It's back in session. And just as Shaw and Cogley are getting ready to, well, they've actually rested their cases. Like, it just happened. But Spock and McCoy run in and be like, no, wait, stop. And they go and talk to Cogley and Kirk to discuss what they found out. And here's where you mentioned earlier, Brian, this is where Cogley brings up all about his human rights and everyone should be fair, the laws in the book. It's just great how his little monologue is trying to change the idea with the judges. But they need time to set it up because it's like an experiment that they need to watch.
Well, and specifically, they have to get up to the Enterprise because that's where the computer is. And that's where Cogley needs everyone to be so that he can start to show that the computer on the Enterprise is flawed, which would call into question the visual record that Shaw is relying on. But then we get a commercial break.
We're back from break, and we are in the briefing room on the Enterprise, where Cogley has Spock reiterate how the computer has been messed with, and that is how there's not a draw when they're playing chess. But if Spock can do that for a simple game, can't it be done for the huge ship? But who has access to that? It is Kirk, Spock, and the records officer, which happens to be Finney. Cogley asks Kirk, what steps did you do to locate Finney after he jettisoned the pod? Kirk said he instituted a stage 1 search to find him. Cogley then asks, isn't the search for those who want to be found? I mean, perhaps Finney is alive and well and doesn't want to be found. Could a man evade the search on a ship of this size?
Ultimately, the scene ends with that question from Cogley, Kirk agreeing that, yes, someone could evade the search if they didn't want to be found, which leads Cogley to make his great declaration to the court-martial trial judges that Finney is still alive and hiding on the ship.
So, excitedly, we're all going to the bridge, except the judges are annoyed. Everyone else is excited because they're going to do something different. They're going to try to find Finney and using technology.
To set everything up, Kirk says that they're going to evacuate the Enterprise except the most basic essential personnel, which basically exists a transporter room operator and those on the bridge. In this moment, Cogley also says that he has to leave on some errand that is important for the trial. He doesn't explain what it is, but that he'll be back shortly.
Once everyone has left, then we just have the few select that are still with us. Spock has been able to eliminate outside noise beyond specific heartbeat from every person on the ship. So it has all been brought together to just be like one ball. Dr. McCoy is going to use a white noise machine to bring it to every single person on board that will slowly eliminate that person's heartbeat from the extra, like the tangled up heartbeats.
But he doesn't bring it to everyone on board. He only uses it on people on the bridge. He doesn't go down to the transporter room, as an example, and use it on the person who was beaming everyone off the ship.
Luckily, he was able to eliminate that person by utilizing the dials on his computer.
Right, Spock did.
So the heartbeat that is left is that of Finney.
Thus proving Cogley's theory, even to eliminate the doubt of the judges in the court martial. Even Commodore Stone stands up in reaction to the sound of the single heartbeat, and Stone confirms that he now understands it is Finney hiding on the ship.
Luckily, Spock is able to also pinpoint where Finney's heartbeat is, where it's located on the ship itself, and Kirk makes his way to where he is hiding,
which is on B deck near engineering.
So while Kirk is searching for Finney, Finney utilizes the open space of where he's hiding to make his voice boom, yelling at Kirk about how he's special and his job is safe, and he's just plain jealous. Kirk keeps looking for Finney, but Finney pops out from behind where he's hiding and it's holding his phaser against Kirk and basically don't move. Finney reassures him he won't kill Kirk. He'd rather harm something more important to Kirk, more like the Enterprise itself.
Right, because in and amongst all of this running around and court martial and everything, in order to set up that little heartbeat experiment, it was necessary to completely shut off the engines of the Enterprise, which, again, as a reminder, is orbiting the planet where Starbase 11 is currently at. Without power to the engines, they can't make any course adjustments. Eventually, their orbit will and does start to decay. And we become quickly aware of Finney's plan. He's sabotaged the electrical circuits in engineering, which would make it impossible to restart the engines, which means the ship itself will eventually fall into the atmosphere of the planet and either burn up in the atmosphere or crash to the planet, destroying the ship and killing everyone aboard.
But Finney isn't counting on Jamie being on board also.
Right, because we failed to mention there was a quick little scene when Kirk's running down to search for Finney in engineering. We get this weird inner monologue. It's not a captain's log, but it's just an inner monologue of Kirk to explain to the viewers that the errand that Cogley had run or was going to go do and why he left the ship was to get Jamie. They figured if they were able to locate Finney, they weren't sure how he would react to being cornered. Jamie's presence, the presence of his daughter, might make him more compliant to go quietly and be arrested.
So the two engage in a physical fight. Like, why are you fighting? Let's actually work together.
Well, Finney doesn't want to work with Kirk. Even with Jamie being on board, that news distracts him enough. Kirk's the one who throws the first punch, and I think maybe Finney's just reacting to the fight.
Luckily, Finney finally releases the location of the device that's holding everything hostage also. And Kirk is able to go up, it's like a tube, and he's pulling everything apart, which allows the Enterprise to stop its falling out of the orbit and gain back its control. Back on the bridge, Commodore Stone asks Miss Shaw if she doesn't object to closing the case. And of course, she says no objection. While everyone starts to get back to their positions on the Enterprise bridge, Kirk and Ms. Shaw slowly make their way to the turbo lift. And they just have like a cute little meet cute where she fervently says, nothing would happen if this lowly lieutenant kisses a nice captain, right? And then they're like, let's check. And a little kiss, and then, wow, nothing happened. And then she turns to leave. Before that, though, he does ask when he could see her again, and she says, oh, you're feeling a bit optimistic, eh? I thought that was cute, too.
It is a fun, flirty scene between the two of them.
And Kirk then just goes back to his chair that is flanked by Spock and McCoy. And just with a sly smile, Captain Kirk comments, she's a very good lawyer. Yes, she is.
And roll credits. So, Jackie, what did you think about Season 1, Episode 20, Court Martial? What are your final thoughts?
I really liked it. I felt that it wasn't so in your face like they have had in the past with the whole women being a damsel in distress. This one showcased a woman who knew who she was and was powerful, and it was able to show a whole new look on the Enterprise itself.
And I thought the episode was, again, very entertaining. Maybe very entertaining is too strong of a word. Cogley as a character, as a lawyer, I think when they finally took the leash off and let him go, he was very entertaining. Overall, the episode just suffers from some serious pacing issues. I can tell this episode itself is going to run long for our podcast. Again, it's so heavily dragging in the first two acts leading up to everything. And then we get an entire second act where we discover Finney's alive, we chase him down, we have a fight scene, to the point where they had to cut out significant dialogue and scenes at the end of the episode to make it all fit into the time frame that they had. So ultimately, a good episode that suffers from this pacing issue. But we'll end with our quotes for the episode to round out our final thoughts. Jackie, what is your favorite quote from the episode?
I truly liked the quote when Cogley is speaking to the court martial panel about, I speak of rights. A machine has none. A man must. Again, we have like the whole power shift of machine. They're so vast, but don't eliminate one for the other.
All right. My favorite quote also is from Cogley. I guess he steals the show for the episode.
He's great.
It's the moment when Kirk is called to the stand during the court martial for the first time and his awards and accolades are being read out. And Shaw objects to the accolades being read. She doesn't want to add too much to his character. Cogley objects and wants the accolades read. So Cogley's quote is in that moment, I wouldn't want to slow the wheels of progress, but then on the other hand, I wouldn't want those wheels to run over my client in their unbridled haste. Immediately before this was the moment where Cogley gives his first glimmer of being a sassy lawyer by saying, I was just waiting for us to get rid of this preliminary business so we can get down to the real stuff. Didn't have enough context as a standalone quote, so it's not the first instance that we get of sassy Cogley, but this is the second, and I think the best quote that shows Cogley knows his stuff as a lawyer. So we'll end that as my favorite quote. I do have some tribble tidbits or fun facts about the episode. First airing February 2nd, 1967. This is the only appearance of the female dress uniform for a female Starfleet officer in the original series. It's worn by Shaw as the prosecutor during the court martial. The difference between the dress uniform and the regular female uniform would be having more of an appearance and a sheen of a satin material. It has the gold edge around the collar in addition to the black collar, but it's also got a longer skirt. So Elijah Cook Jr., who played Lawyer Cogley, while he did a fantastic job, he had a lot of trouble remembering his lines. So his dialogue had to be cut up and spliced together in order for it to make sense.
Sounds like me.
I'll take the fifth. The white noise machine that was used by McCoy to isolate everyone's heartbeat for their little experiment to prove that Finney was still alive was absolutely not needed. Spock, as we mentioned, was able to mask the heartbeat of the transporter room operator who was not on the bridge. So why couldn't Spock just do the same thing? Finney wouldn't have been hiding on the bridge. So he could have just canceled out the bridge and the transporter room. We didn't need the prolonged scene of McCoy going around with this microphone is what it was. The reason for Kirk's awkward voiceovers toward the end of the episode, we get the awkward voiceover as he's running down to engineering to face Finney, as well as the awkward voiceover as he's crawling up the Jeffries tube to untangle, the voiceover that's explaining that after the fight, Finney confessed what he did to sabotage the ship, was all needed because, again, they cut scenes out that would have explained why these next events were occurring. Specifically, Kirk learned of the knowledge originally because there was a scene shot, but didn't make the episode, where after Kirk wins the fight, Cogley and Jamie join them in engineering. Jamie confronts her father, and Jamie convinces Finney, her father, not to go through with his plan and to confess what he did to sabotage the ship. They cut it for time, so we needed an explanation as to Kirk suddenly magically knew how to fix the ship. So we get the voiceover. You can see the judges for the trial in the bar when Kirk and McCoy first enter the bar for the first scene in the bar, but they shouldn't be there because it hasn't been determined that Kirk was needing a court-martial in a trial, so they wouldn't have summoned any of the judges to Starbase 11. This, of course, is because they filmed scenes and then aired them in the episode out of order from each other. Originally, Kirk was already going to have been found guilty in the initial inquiry, and a court-martial would have been called, which is why they would have been summoned. They did all of this, airing out of order of the scenes, to try to fix the pacing of the first half of this episode because it does drag on so much. And lastly, let's talk about Jamie. Alice Rawlings is the actress who played Jamie. We don't have an exact age for Jamie as a character. We only know that she was born sometime in 2250s. So we get like a 10-year age or 9-year gap as to when she could have been born. We know this episode takes place in 2267. So that puts Jamie's age anywhere between 8 and 17. I like to think that she's maybe 12, 13, maybe 15. Maybe 15 is the oldest. I don't think she's a 17-year-old, not with the dress she's wearing. But Alice Rawlings, who was the actress who played Jamie, was 26. When I watched the episode and I first saw Jamie, I was like, you are not able to pull off that age difference. And those are your Tribble tidbits. This is the part of our episode where we share our episode ranking, where we pretend the episode is a member of our crew of our fictitious starship, and what Starfleet rank we would assign them based on how much we enjoyed the episode. A higher rank means we enjoyed the episode and consider the episode a more important member of our crew. A lower rank means we think the episode was less entertaining and the episode is a more disposable member of our ship. Our ranking system is loosely based on Starfleet rankings. We have ensigns at the bottom, lieutenant junior grade, lieutenants, which would be just under middle of the road. And then we have above middle of the road where we limit the number of rankings we can hold, lieutenant commanders, commanders, of course, one captain, and finally an admiral, which we find to be the best, most entertaining, most important episode to the season. And as a reminder, we post a visual representation of our rankings as they currently stand over on our Patreon at patreon.com/treks and tangents. We update our rankings and post them every Wednesday, the day after an episode goes live. So, Jackie, for your Starship, the USS Galactic Glitterbee, what do you give this week's episode?
I think I will need to demote the conscience of the king and place it down with my lieutenant friends. I've had it so high for a while, but as we're going through more of these episodes, I'm enjoying it more. And so that way I can place this week's episode in that spot.
Okay, and why are you giving this week's episode the rank of commander?
Kind of like I said earlier, how I liked it. I greatly enjoyed the lawyer's strength as well as still being very feminine and being able to have a happy ending at the end. And they weren't always just fighting weird looking monsters.
And for my ranking this week for the USS Cosmic Shark, we will be adding this week's episode into the rank of lieutenant. Probably lower than I want to rank this episode. Again, I find it entertaining. I think the character of Cogley is a lot of fun to watch, but at the end of the day, this is an episode that just suffers too much from the pacing issue, and it really took me out of the episode where you have this huge setup for a law drama, you have the trial, and then they do a complete left turn, and we get a rushed third and fourth act with the discovery of Finney and the fight, and again, to the point where they had to cut vital scenes from the episode to make it all fit together. Too much pacing issues. Gonna give it a lieutenant rank. For reference, as of this recording on IMDb, this episode currently ranks a 7.4 out of 10. Again, as a reminder, we will post an update to our rankings with a graphic over at our Patreon at patreon.com/treksandtangents on Wednesday, the day after this episode airs. We'll be back next week to trek through another episode, but before we go, this is where we'll give our turbolift tease or elevator pitch to next week's episode plot. I'll give Jaci the title of the next episode, and Jaci, with no other information, will give a brief pitch or guess or prediction to the plot of next week's episode. Jaci, next week we'll watch The Return of the Archons.
Ooh, this one should be exciting. It sounds like we're going to be introduced to another alien species, and they are coming home while they interrupt Kirk or an away party that is going through their lair and their home.
And tune in next week to see if Jaci's prediction is accurate. If you want more show information, you can find and directly support our podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/treksandtangents. Again, we'll post our updated graphic for our rankings, which is available for anyone to view. We also post for our crew members who support our Patreon. Once a month, we do a bonus episode where we do a deeper dive into Star Trek, the animated series. We also have posted all of the test episodes that we recorded for preparing for this podcast. You can hear us talk and debate and wonder why they made some decisions in the TV show Fringe, as well as Stargate SG-1.
Don't forget Betsy the cow.
With Betsy the cow and Fringe. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment wherever you listen to this podcast. Let us know what, again, you'd like to hear from us. What questions you have, what topics on Star Trek you'd like us to dive deeper into. Maybe we'll do a special series over on our Patreon where we do a deep dive on a specific topic in Star Trek. Maybe we'll do a book club.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Maybe we'll finally get our bonus episodes of Bar Trek off the ground. But let us know what you want to see, what content you'd like us to do. Besides our Patreon, you can also follow us on X at Treks_tangents. We're on Instagram. We're on Blue Sky. But Jaci, where can people find you and what are you up to?
You can find me on Instagram at Jaboom, which is JIBBOOM. I have something super major going on. I'm getting my hip replaced, so I'll be having a lot of post about that because I'm sure it's going to be quite the experience. And plus, I still love my music. And I mean, hey, you can learn at any age, and I'd be happy to help you. You can also find my boutique on Whatnot at Glitterbow Boutique. Thank you.
And you can watch me stream a variety of video games over at twitch.tv/PiratePoundTown. On YouTube, I post video game and other random content on my main channel, Pirate Pound Town. And my secondary YouTube channel can be found at Pirate Treasure Hunting, where I more and more rarely post hobby content, coin collecting. I post socially on Blue Sky at Pirate Pound Town, and I can be found on Instagram under Pineapple Cannibal. Links to all social media mentioned can be found in the episode description. Thank you everyone for tuning into this week's episode. We hope you had fun like we did, and we will see you all next week.
And don't forget to be a very good lawyer.
End transmission.